In this paper today, I try to situate the opera À travers du mur by the Italian-French composer Giuseppe Poniatowski in the larger debate over Wagner's reception in Paris and in the context of the reflection over opera genre which the arrival of Wagner's theories provoked. Between the July Revolution and the Franco-Prussian War, the Opéra Comique staged several new works which were in line with its policies of promoting the French language and the French artists, generally eschewing the low humor of the boulevard theater and the satirical plots of the opéra bouffe. The popularity of the opéra bouffe had its peak during the reign of Napoleon III, and in the same period, Offenbach established his Théâtre des Bouffes Parisiennes so that his operettas could be performed. But, as we know, there was another event that created a very lively cultural, aesthetical, and political debate in Paris: the arrival of Wagner's theories and operas, in particular the 3 performances of his opera Tannhäuser in 1861. Within a couple of days, Wagner's unsuccessful revisions of his opera for Paris became the subject of legend, and they have remained so ever since. Annegret Fauser has pointed out that the Parisian was not just an unreflecting hostility toward Wagner and his musical language, but rather a mirror of the deep concerns about the future of the opera, the primary genre of French cultural life, its institutional context, and its musical and poetic language, whose danger could be discussed in time-tested terms of national difference rather than internal artistic conflict. Even before the performance of Tannhäuser, Wagner had already been one of the most discussed composers in Paris, where his theoretical works, Die Kunst und die Revolution, Kunstwerk der Zukunft und Oper und Drama, were in circulation. Against Wagner, there were many critics, above all François-Joseph Fétis, who kept the controversy alive until the premiere of Tannhäuser, as well as Paul Scudo and Léon Escudier, whose terms shaped the debate for a long time. Flaubert's remarks about Wagner in his Dictionnaire des idées reçues, ou Catalogue des opinions chic, are particularly well known. So at the voice Wagner, he says, the definition is snigger when you hear his name and make jokes about the music of the future. No sooner said than done. Caricatures and jokes became a daily occurrence and found their place also in the rich repertoire of Parisian parody. On February 10th, 1860, only 2 days after the last Wagner's concert in which extracts from his opera were performed, Offenbach added the comic scene Le Musicien de l'Avenir to his Le Carnaval des Revues. In this scene, Wagner faces the spirits of Weber, Grétry, Gluck, and Mozart, and has to explain his revolutionary theories by offering them an example of such music. Even though Offenbach had shown hardly any knowledge of Wagner's music, the opera was so successful that it was still played at the time of Tannhäuser premiere, and it was performed at the Théâtre Italien at the request of Napoleon III. Yet, Offenbach's parody is not the only example of musical theatre to have taken an active role in reflecting about opera itself in Wagner's reception. As I will illustrate in my presentation, the Opéra Comique à travers du mur by Giuseppe Poniatowski is a musical parody that presents both the national difference and the internal aesthetical artistic conflict. In this way, Poniatowski's opera perpetuated the terms of the critics and embodied the French concerns about the opera of the future, as well as the future of the opera by meta-theatrical means. Before we take a closer look to this opera, I think Giuseppe Poniatowski needs to be introduced briefly. Despite the fact that he's almost forgotten today, his role as man of culture was a very prominent one during his lifetime in Italy as well as in France. Grandnephew of the last king of Poland, he was born in Rome in 1814 and received his first music education in Florence, where he actively participated in the musical life of Tuscany, starting his activity first as a singer, composer, and patron, before later he came to hold significant diplomatic posts under Leopold II, Grand Duke of Tuscany. Here you can see a list of selected works in which he took part as a singer, among which I would like to highlight the Italian premiere of Rossini's Stabat Mater, here, which was not in Bologna, but maybe we can discuss it later. And here I prepared a list of his operatic output in Italy. Between 1851 and 1854, he moved to Paris. We don't know exactly the date because I didn't find any particular letter or a document, but it was between these two dates. Moved to Paris, where his personal friend Napoleon III granted him the French citizenship and appointed him senator of the French Empire. This newly gained honor allowed him to resume his artistic endeavors, commissioning his operas to be translated and performed while he started writing new ones. Additionally, Poniatowski held important cultural offices. Among those, for example, in 1861, he was appointed artistic director of the Théâtre Italien. Here you can see a list of his output in Paris, which allows us now to return to his opera À travers du mur. Poniatowski's opera comique in one act was the second opera in French language which he composed after his arrival in Paris. The libretto was written by Jules-Henri Vernois de Saint-Georges, who also produced librettos for Aubert, Donizetti, and Halévy, and among others. The opera was premiered at Théâtre Lyrique on the 9th May 1861, on the occasion of the last appearance of the singer Charles Bataille. The orchestral reduction of this opera was published by Léon Escudier in Paris in the same year, and since no orchestral score is known even today, the following considerations are based on the version for voices and piano. The opera presents a meta-theatrical plot and several farcical and parodic elements, both in the text and in the music. All the characters are related to the operatic sphere, and music itself is the central topic. Not only opera and music are quoted and commented on throughout the opera, but it is the cause of misunderstanding between the protagonists, who fall in love with each other after hearing their singing À travers le mur at the hotel where Thomasin is lodging. The text presents parodic elements, as for example the Italianization of foreign names and terms, a practice that endured for a long time in Italy. The main character, the opera singer Thomasin, wishes to be called Tommasini. I took the fashion of the country. The E is a must, he declares at the beginning of the opera. But he claims that his stomach remains French, introducing the first level of national difference with more than a hint of irony. It is the Parisian gastronomy we, French singers, we have to Italianize. The stomach remains national, the patriotism of the cuisine immovable, and my appetite is like my patriotism. A further element is the ironic use of literary quotations, which I do not have the time now to analyze in details, but which could tell us something about the literary circulation and reception of Shakespeare, Corneille, Young, and so on. Music quotation certainly plays a central role. The most representative example is the trio in the fifth scene. Thérèse, the hotel's owner, wants to reveal to Léon that he has fallen in love with the same girl who is being sought after by his uncle. But Gambetto, her husband and dilettante musician, prevents the revelation by playing his trombone. As in Offenbach's Le Carnaval de Revue, Meyerbeer is used as a source of parody. In this case, Poniatowski quotes the Évocation from Robert le Diable. In this way, Poniatowski displays a good awareness. Sorry, this is the Meyerbeer original. and this is Poniatowski's score. In this way, Poniatowski displays a good awareness of the convention and humor of French opera, resorting to one of the best-known melodies of the operatic scene of that time, and was clear also to the press. It is not with the one that Gambetto leads his wife, it is with the trombone. The scenes of households are crowned daily by a fading of Teresin, where the trombone is at the same time the cause and the effect, as rather Mr. Vartel, who uses in the manner of Bertram in Robert le Diable. The opera's pivotal moment is certainly the scene number 10, in which the meta-theatrical element becomes even more explicit. Tommasini meets Pascal, his old friend and composer, who, following his musical education in Germany, has composed a masterpiece which he is now trying to have performed in Italy. The topic of their discussion regards which musical style, the Italian or the German one, is more convenient for this work, and which adjustments should be made to his composition. Once again, the first sentence shows a close similarity with Offenbach's Le Carnaval de Revue. Making the parody explicit, Pascal says, "I have left for Germany, the country of Gluck, of Mozart, of Weber, but I belong to another school. I composed the masterpiece which I keep there. It's all a musical revolution." Pascal then presents his masterpiece as grand, large, and wise, and wishes to have an audience. "The text," he says, "is written by a romantic poet friend of mine. And the music, ah, my dear, what a music. It is great, large, it's savant. Oh, I wish I could have an audience, a large audience. You will see what an effect, what a silence in the room." And Tommasini answers, "The silence of slumber, maybe," resorting to the most common criticism about the monotony of Wagner's music. Let us take as an example the article that Léon Escudier published in La France Musicale on 29 January 1860. The music of the future, talking about the music of the future, the effect produced by Mr. Wagner's first concert was a soporific effect of teeth grinding. We were deeply bored. The merchant chorus of an opera which has the name Tannhäuser are perhaps what Mr. Wagner has written more clearly and more sympathetically. Here, the composer descends into clearer and more comprehensible spheres. He becomes Italian. It is unfortunate that Mr. Wagner does not stick to this genre, which is the only true, the only acceptable one. The terms of national difference expressed in this article are recalled by Tommasini, who proposes to sing Pascal's musique allemande à l'italien, offering in this way his first, but nevertheless subtle, suggestion for revision. The duet which follows, despite the simple musical profile, gives the music a high degree of intertextuality and serves to represent the musical national differences in ironic fashion. Pascal decides to describe the situation of his grand aria, Jung au tombeau de sa fille, and Poniatowski's music imitates the gist of his plot, once more recalling the critics of Wagner's music. The vocal part interrupts the orchestral introduction, which the text that you can read on the screen, with the text that you can read on the screen. At the words, "everything is silent," corresponds a pause of the orchestra. The rustling is represented with a tremolo, probably by the strings. The lugubrious and touching motive is expressed through chromatism and dissonances. The father steers through orchestral acciaccaturas. Then Pascal declares his own technique and style, making an appropriate example. "It is in the imitative that my art constantly pleases. Of the father, I depicted the pain with the bass, and the beats of his heart are noted on the bass drum part. Toc, 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 toc. Poniatowski magnifies the imitative style of this music of the future, scoring these notes to be played by the bass drum and adding the words toc toc. So it's something that Poniatowski added at the libretto, which accompany the pulse for 4 bars 15 times in order to underline the prolixity and the imitative style. The reference to Wagner appeared clear to the contemporary press, which commented on the performance as follows. I have the English version. There is only one person missing from the picture that we have just sketched out. The Richard Wagner of the play, Mr. Pascal, first prize of Rome, droned his diploma in the living waters of the new German school and plays us a descriptive, imitative, philosophical and contemplative symphony within an opera comique. As soon as Pascal starts to sing the aria, Tomasini interrupts him and criticizes the music for its monotony and boringness, recalling and thus perpetuating the terms used by the critics about Wagner, turning this opera into a vignette of anti-Wagnerism, as we can see in comparison with this slide. So this is the libretto. This is what Tomasini says, and in La France Musicale we find the Song of the Pilgrims is of an strenuous length. It is not a song, it is a tedious psalmody. All this is polished, tormented, and above all very annoying. The opening of Tannhäuser passes in the eyes of the friends of the music of the future for a vast conception, full of science. For us, it's a pretentious, symphonic page, badly designed, noisy to definite view. In this way, Tomasini proposes a deliberate revision to the music, which he will sing in the clearer and more comprehensible Italian way. At first, Pascal refuses. "You denature my music," he says. But then, contrary to the real fact, Pascal Wagner accepts to modify his opera to suit the audience taste. It's a profanation, but if you think it must succeed, I sacrifice to the god of fashion. By this decision, the opera presents a positive yet ironic solution which serves as a utopic happy end for the debate about Wagner's music. He could have been successful if he had sacrificed his opera à la mode française. In fact, in this way, the opera is further perpetuating the legends about Wagner's failure. This was the point of view of a group of conservatives, often nobles attached to the opera comique, and not artists more interested in aesthetical renewal like Baudelaire and the younger generation of French composer. On the other side, Poniatowski demonstrates to be fully aware of the French operatic scenario and the conventions of the French audience, and at the same time aware of the necessity to reflect about the conventions of the opera genre through opera itself as potential representative of national difference. Thank you.